be happy. Be positive that that's what's going on. We did have somebody in the class this morning go to check it out first. So it's a thing, it happens. That's all right. But he made it to class, he made it here. He said now he's really ready for it next week. He knew that it was today. So we have a couple of presentations loaded to Canvas here. The first one is kind of my presentation, and then the second one is from the textbook. So I'm going to open the one that is my presentation. I have added a link in there, but basically that version on Canvas is the same. Let me open it here. Okay, that should be it. So basically, our textbooks just hate saying things like decision making and looping. They have to use all these fancy words like selection and repetition. But that's what looping is repeating or repetition. So I wanted to show you this video. This link is what is missing from your version. Yeah. I didn't look to see where it was from. Because I kind of think that one in the peach colored shirt is the teacher, but I'm not sure. Oh, yeah? Yeah. Well, maybe that's where it's from. We thought you were all sick.
My dog ran off. I didn't find her.
Oh, no, did you find her?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
Basically, my mom's dog gets let out with any other dog in the house, and she would take off with them. So they let her dog out.
You went for a run.
Huh?
You went for a run.
No, I told you it was my sports, so I went for a run. They don't really run from me.
Okay, so what are these people doing? Playing musical chairs. And are they looping? Yeah, they're looping. They're doing the same thing over and over and over, right? When are they going to stop? Well, when are they going to stop to sit down? When are they going to stop each loop? When the music stops. So do we know how many times they're going to go each time? No, because it could just depend on how long that music plays, right? If it plays for a really short amount of time, they'll only be able to loop a few times. But if it plays for a really long time, they'll be able to loop for a long time. So we couldn't just use some sort of counter to control this loop. We can't just say, do this 7 times. We have to have some sort of control here of this loop that is more of a condition, like while the music is playing or until the music stops, they're going to keep walking. So I just want you to kind of be thinking about that. Oh, she finally got out. That's why I can't imagine. I've always had too many boys in my class. If we'd have tried to play musical chairs, it would have turned into a musical brawl. So
we can always try it.
yeah, I want to try it. I thought we could try it. No, I think not. That's not what we need. Not what we need. Bunch of computer guys. Yeah. So our last topic we talked about was if statements. And if you remember, and I know you do, our condition, the condition of our if statement was the big deal, right? If A is equal to B, if A is less than B, the condition stuff is what's really controlling our logic of our program. And when we have a flow chart and we have an if statement or a decision-making construct, we use the diamond. And of course, we have the true and false paths coming out of it. Well, for a looping structure, we're going to take that diamond and just add a little bit more. So because a loop is always based on some sort of decision, is the music still playing? Has the music stopped? that would be our decision for musical chairs, we have to have a condition still in a loop. So to control our loop execution, we're going to have a condition that's formatted exactly the same as that condition is formatted for an if statement. So we can use that same code and all of the same logical constructs that we've learned about already to control a loop. So look at this flow chart here. We're reading in some sort of data. We're asking to make some sort of decision. If that decision evaluates to true, we're going to be done. But if it evaluates to false, we're going to do some sort of work. Then, in our flow chart, we can see this flow of control. We're going to be returned to that decision again to say, reevaluate this decision. If it's true, but if it's not, run that process again and reevaluate the decision again. So that really demonstrates our looping kind of construct when we're working with a flow chart. So our decision diamond is usually involved, and we have some sort of upwards pointing arrow to show that we're going to go back and reevaluate some sort of decision. So to review about our test conditions, whenever we're working with a test condition, we want to get a Boolean value as a result, either true or false. We use the relational operators, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, is equal to, and is not equal to. Don't forget those double equal signs when we're working with our test condition. Remember, our condition has to have two sides, a left and a right side. Those operands or sides can be variables, or they can be literal values, or whatever we want to use there. But we just have to formulate that complete test condition. Now, when we're working with iteration or repeating code, we have some terms that we need to be aware of. First of all, an iteration is an execution of the loop body one time. So if we were watching them play musical chairs, one time walking around the chairs would be one iteration. The loop body is that code that's executing if the loop condition is true. So in our musical chairs demo, if the music was playing, they're just going to keep walking. That's the body of the loop. Now, an infinite loop is really, really bad. This is a loop that never ends. And if you've ever played musical chairs, sometimes that kind of thing can happen. I remember at birthday parties where the mom would get like busy and leave the music going forever. And you'd get to thinking you're never going to get to ever sit down again. Well, we can have that kind of thing happen in our code. If we don't code our condition properly or do something in our loop to make the loop end, we can have a loop that never ever ends and just starts using processing power on the computer. So if you've ever been to a website where it just sort of hangs and finally you get control back and you try it again and it just sort of hangs and finally you get control back, they probably have coded an infinite loop in their logic somewhere. And it's hanging while that's happening until your system quits waiting and stops. So we can have some loops set up in different ways. A pre-test loop is a kind of loop where we check a condition before we do anything else. And if the condition is true, then we execute the loop body. So here's a flow chart for that. We read in a number and we say, is that number valid? Is it a number? If no, we ask them to input a number again. And we're just going to keep checking. Is it valid? No, input a number. Is it valid? No, input a number. Get the idea? We're just going to keep checking and keep executing that loop body over and over. When we finally get a valid number, then we'll drop out of our loop and continue executing the rest of our code to do whatever it is we need to do after that loop body is done. So here's some pseudocode. We've got some nice pseudocode here where we're asking the user to enter a number, and then we're reading the number. Now we have a loop set up here that says while the number is not valid, we're going to write out the message, please enter a number and read a number again. So that's exactly the same as that flow chart we were looking at. It's just that now it's in pseudocode. So not real code, but pseudocode. When the loop gets done, at the end while, we'll continue on executing the code in our source code file. Now, if we look at this one, what's important for pseudocode, and it will be also for your real Python code, is the keyword while. So it's highlighted in bold, and that's showing you that that's an important term. So the keyword while indicates that we're starting a loop, and the end while indicates that that's the end of the loop body. And all of the lines of code in between are the loop body that we're going to execute over and over and over if we need to. Now, sometimes we set up our loop where we'll execute the loop body and then check the condition to see if we need to do it again. So this is called a post-test loop. So here's a flow chart for that. Here we input a number, check to see if it's valid. If it's not, we input a number again. So the flow chart looks pretty much the same. It's kind of hard for us to tell the difference when we're looking at a flow chart as to whether it's a pre-test or a post-test loop. But in our pseudocode, we can tell a little bit more. So here's a post-test loop. It starts out with the keyword repeat, and then all of the lines of code that are between the keyword repeat and the keyword until are the loop body. So the first time this program executes, we'll run this. Please enter a number, we'll type out, and then we'll input a number. Then we'll check to see if that number is valid. If it is, we'll stop because we've reached our until condition. If it's not, we'll go back up to that repeat and start again. So we'll keep doing that until we get a valid number. So that's just a post-test loop. Here's another post-test loop. This one uses do while instead of repeat until. They're the same pretty much. What's the difference? Well, the repeat until says keep doing this until this condition is met. So we would say until the music stops, right? Where do while is a little bit the same, a little bit opposite. Because here we're saying, here's our loop body between the keywords do and while. Enter a number, input the number. But in our while condition now, notice we've turned it into a not. So while the number is not valid, keep doing this. So for our musical chairs example, we would say do moving around while the music is playing, where here we said repeat until the music stops. So just a little bit different. It kind of just depends on what our logic is in our program as to which syntax we'll use, whichever one works best for us. In different programming languages are going to support different constructs here for our looping. We can have nested loops. It's funny because sometimes I don't know about this example, but this morning I actually had someone come in like 30 minutes late saying, 20 minutes looking for a parking spot. In case you wondered, I just am always like, should have got here earlier, right? But anyways, because yeah, it takes a long time to my parking spot, so that's why I don't leave at lunch. So think about this loop. You get here and you're trying to park. So while that condition is true, while you're still trying to park, we're going to execute another loop inside there. We're going to be checking for a parking space in the Norman K. Myers parking lot. I don't know where you guys park. I like to park right out here on the side, right by the doors. But I know a lot of people park across the street. So either of those, I guess you could consider the Norman K. Myers parking lot. So while we're checking that lot, if we finally find a spot, we're going to set our Booleans, trying to park and checking Norman K. Myers, to false. We're not checking anymore, and we're not trying to park anymore. We finally found a spot. But if we don't find a spot, we're just going to keep driving. Drive to the next row. Don't see anything. Drive to the next row. Don't see anything. So we're just going to keep looping in that same kind of situation until we finally find something. Or, like we don't even show the logic on here, we give up in the Norman K. Myers parking lot, set the checking Norman K. Myers Boolean to false, and move to a new parking lot and start trying to check it. So we would still be trying to park at that point, but then we would be checking a different parking lot. So whenever we're working with loops, we can have a loop within another loop, depending on what logic we need. So there's lots more for us to talk about with loops, but that's just enough for us to get started. So let's do one quick sample program, and then we're going to work mostly on study type things so that all of our absent people can get all that stuff done too. And hopefully you guys are all going to do all sorts of healthy things this weekend and not let any germs get you. Nobody be gone next week. So what was that thing called they showed us last week? Pie charm? Huh? Tuesday. You find it? Got some arrows for you. So mine, I had to go to a different folder. So I'll go back to my original one. Let's see, I bet I have it already. How can I get to it? Uh-oh. You guys keep being able to, okay, I finally got to my H drive. It's like I've heard of all these network problems this week around campus. I keep expecting us to have them, and so far we haven't had much trouble, but it's been pretty slow.
I was going to say something earlier. I feel like sometimes the process is slower.
Other times, they've really, from what I've heard, I don't know for sure, but from what I've heard, they've had a lot of network issues around campus this week. So like the electronic media production department yesterday said all of the licenses expired on all their software, and they just went, and so I would assume all those license issues are probably causing a lot of network trouble because they have all the Adobe software and all the Autodesk software. So I finally got my library open because with PyCharm I had been using it already today and gone to a different folder, and so I had to get this one open. Now, again, let me know if you're having trouble seeing. I can increase the font size. Maybe. You what? It won't work. No. Nope. Mm-mm. You what? I found it earlier. It's just being mean to me. I was like so happy. Yay, there it is. No big deal. Now, if you guys opened your folder correctly, if you have all of your stuff that you've been working on in class saved in one folder like I do, then you should be able to navigate through all your different Python programs. Of course, most of my folder contents are Raptor flowcharts and text files that are just our pseudocode. So you could try looking at some of your pseudocode. It looks fine in PyCharm. You can still look at those files. It's not like it's going to keep you from editing them or anything like that. It'll let you edit all of those files just like all your Python files. So I want to do our first little looping thing. This is fall. Like, where am I? I got one. It's taken me a long time to find the ones that I want to start with for us. All right, so let's create a new program. So I right-clicked and I did new, and I want to create a new Python file. And I'm going to name this name loop. For this program, you remember when we were talking about comments early on, we saw that we could use 3 tick marks. Did you find it? Where is it?
I'm gonna turn it on for you. It's gonna be under editor, and I press control. What it does? It's gonna be under general, and we're gonna say change with.
Awesome. Thank you.
Reply.
You are so
And now
good.
I should be able to.
You're not sick, are you?
No.
Oh, good.
I am actually really weird about getting sick.
Good.
And I should be able to control.
Thank you.
You created a new file.
Uh-huh. So I did right-click new file and new Python file when it gives you that list. So this program will be pretty short.
Does it matter what the icon looks like? It's just blue and yellow at the top. Sometimes it's like blue.
I think it's still a Python icon. What's he say?
Mine's unable to use. I'm just joking.
We'll fix you.
Yeah.
Can you write any code?
Nope.
Why, what's it doing?
It's great.
PyCharm won't let you use anything? Yeah, close it and see, because the network was being really slow with mine.
Yeah, I won't. It's the new file, new project.
If you do create a new file, I can certain and take it into your H drive.
Well, oh, there we go.
This is an extra.
Like sometimes programmers just
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
Should work in.
I'm 10%.
Oh, you're so close.
Sit down here with this. Saturday.
It's never gonna load.
You just flash.
Oh, there you go.
Really?
No.
Okay, I like it. Flag. Yeah.
And then we need to name it.
Yeah, I think.
Name.
Oh, that's
She's gonna fix this up here, color these.
I guess it's just named
Really big.
Ooh, pretty. Okay, now we got some brightness going. She made it really bright. We'll have it perfection.
Mine's not a color at all. It's mine's black.
Yours is all ugly.
Yeah, mine's like
Okay, now everybody wants theirs to be all coloredy. Where do we go?
Press Control-Alt-S,
Control-Alt-S for settings.
and then go to Editor.
Editor.
You already have it dropped down, the others might not, the Editor tab. And
Yep.
then go down to Color Scheme.
So you're going to expand Editor. Color Scheme.
And then drop down and it's Warm Neon. Is the one she's using. You can choose any one. Hers is one.
Darkula. That's probably
I
awesome.
think Darkula is the one everyone has got right now.
Might be a little bit bloody. Okay, so our program here is going to prompt the user for a name and display it. This program is going to use a Sentinel value to end the loop. So a Sentinel value is some sort of special character or special thing that we ask a user to enter when they're done. Now I'm going to throw a few other things at you. So far, we've just been typing all of our Python code in a line, just sequentially. And we haven't worried about any sort of modules or subprograms or anything like that. And a few chapters ago, when we were looking at those data flow diagrams, we said we usually start with the main module. Well, so for this program, we're going to go ahead and put in that main module. So to declare a module or a function in Python, we use the def keyword. I'm going to bring up my Word document that had my quick reference in it. I'm going to have to go find it because since the computers have been reloaded, it's not going to be in my recently accessed files. Okay, so in our quick reference, actually a couple of things we need to add. I'm going to go to the end of my last row, and I need to put in elif condition, because we use the elif in class in a program or two, but we don't have it in our quick reference. So right now, we have if condition, colon. That's how we format an if statement. We have else colon, and that's how we format an else statement. But we need to include elif. And if we use an elif, we have to have a condition, because an elif is an else and an if combined. So it must have a condition. So you could add a little bit more if you want to about your elif. If you want to add some sample code, that's up to you. It's a pretty good idea. But now we just learned about the def statement. So the def statement for define starts out the keyword def, then our function name, then we're going to have open and closing parentheses and a colon. So this is going to define a function. And a function is a module in Python. So in our textbook, they kept calling them modules. Python actually uses that term module for something else, and it calls these subprogram pieces functions. Now, once I define a function like that, all of the code in the function has to be indented under that define keyword. So all code in the function body must be indented under the def keyword. So we're going to define a main and put our code in there. So we're going to start out with a print statement asking our user to enter the name of your brother or sister. So I'm going to put a comment above that. This is going to print out the first line of our prompt. I have some white space here I need to get rid of that PyCharm is warning me about, which is awesome. Now, remember we use our input statement to actually read input from the console, from the user, and we need to decide, spit it out, where we're going to put that data that the user types in, and we're going to create a variable named name to hold that. So we're going to set up this input statement to give the user the second line of our prompt. And it's going to say, enter the word done to quit. So looking at this, I need to take the colon off that first prompt because I'm not really asking for data right there. And I'll leave it on the second. PyCharm has a little light bulb here for me. So I'm going to look at it. It says, oh, you got some trailing blank lines, and I'll let it keep reminding me about those for a little while and decide if I want to know or not. Now, we didn't declare our name variable before we used it. We've been trying to do that. So let's go be nice about that. Name equals an empty string. So we'll print out our first prompt line and then print out the second line with input. So the word done is going to be our sentinel value. That's what we want to know, what we want to see to know that this loop is done. We want to see that word done. We don't think there's going to be any brothers or sisters with that name because we always have to try to think of a sentinel value that wouldn't be in our data. So let's do our first while statement. I am off on this keyboard. So we're going to start out with the keyword while, and we're going to say while the name that the user has typed in is not equal to the keyword done, I want to put this, I want to say, I want to let them be able to type in a lowercase d also. So I'll say, or name not equal the lowercase done. We're going to print out the name they entered. We're going to print out the prompt again. Enter, oops, I need my double quotes. Enter the name of your brother or sister. And then on the next line, I'm going to have that input statement just exactly the same as we had it before. So now we're done with our while statement. So I'm going to back tab or backspace so that my indent is even with the while statement. And this is kind of like my end while statement in Python. Since I don't really have an end while statement, Python knows that the while loop body is done when we're not indenting anymore. So at that point, let's print out a message. Thank you for listing your siblings. So if I want to get all the way out of this main function that we've declared now, again, we need to backspace so that we're not indented anymore. So that would be a place where I could start typing code to do something new. And what I want to do at that point is tell Python to run my main. So because Python is interpreted, it has to read in these functions and know this main function exists before it'll let us execute it. So we're going to list all of the things that we want to happen in our main function. And then by typing the name of our main function, we're going to run it to cause it to run. So let's try here and see what happens. I want to save. And when we're working with a nice IDE like PyCharm, it's probably going to save for us automatically. But when you start doing loops in your code, it's very easy to create one of those infinite loops. And sometimes you have to end task on your program development environment to get that loop to stop. So you want to make sure you're saving often. It's a little bit more of a thing than if you're not coding looping logic. So let's try and run this thing. Now remember, they told us last time you can use this drop down up here to make sure that it is looking at the program that you're looking at. Mine's not. Or you can right click and just say run on this code, and I want to run this name loop. So now down here in the bottom area is where our Python interpreter is showing up now. So we have to actually click down there to be able to enter any data. So I'll type one in. So there's one of my brothers and sisters. And then it prompts me again for another one. I'll type another one in. You'll see my parents did that awesome thing where they gave us all names that start with R's. And then they would be looking at us going, ruh, 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 not knowing how to say it. But it works. So that's all of my brothers and sisters. You guys might have fewer, you might have more. So I'm going to try to type done, because I'm done. It didn't even acknowledge me. Well, I'm going to try a lowercase done, because we put in that condition, right? So our loop is working great, but it's not stopping. So that's kind of an infinite loop, only it's not processor bound because it's sitting waiting for us. So what's wrong with this while statement? It's not doing something right. It's working, it's giving us a loop, and it's asking us this information every single time, but why is it not ending when we type in the word done?
Do you know how a command for it to quit?
Nope, I don't need to, it's the condition. So what's wrong with that condition? Why? What's wrong with it? How can we fix it? If I type in the word done with an uppercase D, is the condition of our while loop true? Yep, so it's going to keep executing, right? Now, if I type the word done with a lowercase letter, D to end our loop, is our while condition true? Yeah, so it's still going to execute our loop. So how could I change this condition so that it's not true always? Could I change that or to an and? We want to know that what they typed in is not either version of the done word. So always be careful with not conditions and the or keyword, because you'll get always true and kind of an infinite loop. Now that we fixed that, let's run it again. And we should be able to put in our brothers and sisters. And now if I put in the word done, it stops because our condition is formatted correctly to make our code stop executing like we want. How's yours? Everybody good? Does it work?
Mine's not.
What's the matter?
Anything we know, I don't even know what mine did.
What's yours doing?
It's giving me something that's in my
Right click right in the middle of your code.
So
Tell it to
we
run.
it just includes
It's just the do the drop down chance. It's just
Whoops. I love that, tricking and stuff, but man, it's hard on me. So right click on that code.
Yeah, that's what I
Right click.
just right.
There it is finally. Yours being
Did it say
being
that,
super slow.
Is it Python file?
I mean,
Well, I can't even type. I wasn't changing anything. Mine was really bad.
His was here just a minute ago. Perfect. Now it's.
but yeah.
It's still not running this one.
Then it's
So right click on it.
Yeah, because it's a couple of actually start seeing
Running on location. That's this code. So you're.
you have to.
Yeah, click there, because you have to do it. So under your while, it wants you to have some indentation. So there's 3 lines to put under the while to be indented. So you can minor indentation. They worked it. Your trauma. What? Is it not letting you run it? It lets you.
Oh, now it won't. You predict the future. Right? It isn't anymore. It's perfect.
I really don't like the last situation. I want something that like this.
I have a hard time seeing
This. I want to do that.
I'm having a hard time seeing all you guys, so we might, everybody might have to change to that. We need to see it. Okay, so this is great. Now, how could you guys update this program to where it would count how many brothers and sisters a person has? Let's try that on your own, and then we'll come together and think about how we can do that.
So you need to find the use that stuff.
I see. So you also need to call him in.
I wish they would have been more. It looks like this one looks different.
It is, they're connected.
Do you think they should?
They have to read Okay. Why do we have to have this? Oh, it's
Okay. Well, it's different. It's very different.
Well, there's actually.
We're able to click.
It just goes.
Yeah.
It's the only thing. Oh, that's true.
That's till the end.
Oh, so shouldn't this be input? Keep it consistent. Oh, it is consistent. It's perfectly consistent.
What's the matter?
But really, it's my inputs are unresolved.
Oh. You are failure.
I think we should talk about the thing. Let's create. So that we can see. Since you said it was a
We're going to use
I didn't know this was, I knew what it was, but it still just didn't seem to think it was.
no, it's solid. No, I need it within the next 2 days. I'm sorry, 1 day. I need it by Friday.
So you didn't have to, that's all right. It's not going to keep anything, you're okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you want to change it, click the stop button
That's exactly right.
to stop running. And then it'll let you change it. But you had it different, it was just not right.
Yes. There's a few I can do that on by yeah.
So how can we count the names?
She's wanted to
I figured you can do that.
He's thinking.
Literally, I thought
Okay, so you got it? Everybody's got it? First of all, we need to create a variable to hold that count, right? Then in our while loop, after we print out a name, we want to add to our count. And the plus equal is just a shortcut, add. So that's the same as saying count equal count plus 1. We just only have to name the variable once. And then we'll update our message. Thank you. I see you have count siblings. Now with our count, because it's a number, we need to wrap it in that str function. So it'll turn it into a string to print it properly. So really, it's almost just exactly the same thing as we would have to do if we were talking to somebody and we said, do you have any brothers and sisters? What's one of their names? And they would say Joe, and you'd say, oh, do you have any others? And they say Tom, and you could keep asking them, do you have another? They could say Frank, and in your head, you would have to set up a counter and start adding to it if you wanted to keep track of how many names they were telling you. We have to do just the same exact thing in our code. There's no magic to it or anything. If we want to count those things, we've got to count them. Now I'm going to run this again. And I get my prompt. And then I can say done. And it tells me that I have 3 siblings. So some common problems when we're looping and we're counting. We can have some things happen. If I started out with my counter equal to 1, here when I set it up, I could end up with 1 too many. That would be an off by 1 error. And that happens a lot with many different things because when we're controlling loops, we have to be concerned about several different things. How is our loop being controlled? How are we counting? All of those different things. Okay, if everything looks good with that one, if everybody's got it, okay, let's start a new one. So in my folder, again, I'm going to right click and choose new Python file. This one is going to be a sum loop, like adding a sum, not like someone, a sum loop. So I'm going to start out again with the 3 single quotes. And of course it types 6 because it's giving me my opening and closing. I'm going to press enter in between them to separate them. So I'm going to sum up a list of numbers. So for this application, we're going to start out with our main. We've got a couple of variables. We need a total that we want to start equal to 0. And then for this application, we're going to ask our user what the high number is. So like we'll ask them, you want me to sum all the numbers lower than what? And we're going to ask them what that number is. So they could type in like 6, and we would add 6 plus 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1. And that would be the sum that we would create. So our user num is also going to start out as 0 because it's going to be a number type variable. Now this time, when we read in our user number, we're going to convert it to an integer. And our prompt is going to include information about that sentinel value. So we're going to say, please enter a number, not a number, comma, enter 0 to quit. Perfect. So that should give us our first number. So our while loop is going to be a lot like the while loop we did in our last program. While the user number is not equal to 0, because we said we'll stop when you enter 0. So as long as they don't enter 0, we're going to add the number to the total. We're going to print out a piece of information here, the current total, and our total. And remember, if we use the comma in a print statement, we don't have to convert that number to a string. Then we're going to repeat our input request. Now, one mistake that a lot of beginning programmers make, and actually a lot of experienced programmers too, is they put the first time they prompt the user or the first time they read data inside their while loop. It's real common. It's kind of like a thing that a lot of people are taught. But when you do that, you have to set up your variables beforehand to make sure the loop will start, right? Because otherwise it's not going to do your first prompting for input. And then you have to do weird things like special code to get out of the loop if they actually type in a 0. So this way of doing it, the way we're going about it, is called a priming read, because we do the first read before we go into the loop. And we are saying, get us set up to start looping here. Give me this number. Then our while statement should automatically work, because if the user types 0 the very first time, we'll never execute the loop. But if they don't, we'll execute the loop and ask them again. We don't have to worry about breaking out. So after this loop is done, I'm going to backspace to unindent so that Python knows our loop body is complete. Then I'm going to print out the final total. Now at this point, I haven't put in the line of code to tell Python to execute this main module, this main function. So I want to run it and show you what happens without that. So down in the Python area, we'll see a message about our program and that it finished with exit code 0. So every time I do that, you guys can just remind me, you didn't put in your main, you didn't run your main. I don't do it, you know, just because I'm forgetful. I want to make sure you guys know what's wrong. So now I'm going to run that main. Why is it mad at me about it? Can you run it now? So now when I run it, I get my prompt. Please enter a number, enter 0 to quit. I lied about what this loop was going to do. I told you it was going to take the number they enter and add every number less than that. That's not correct. What this code is going to do is ask them for a number to add to the total. So we're only adding the actual numbers they give us. So 4, 37, 21. So every time we iterate through the loop, we're asking our user for a number. They're giving us a number. Now, when they finally type 0, because they're done, we should see that our final total is the same as our last total. So everybody's working okay? No? What's the matter? You guys can help each other too. Oh, we did. What's that?
It says, line 62.
You got it. Everybody else working? That's okay? All right, so let's do one more because I want to do that one where we're going to sum up all the numbers from what the user typed in, because that's kind of like the one that's your assignment for the week, and I want to make sure that you have a little bit of an example to go on. So let's try one more new Python file. And this one, let's see, that last one we named sum loop. I'm going to call it sum loop 2. How's that? Super creative today. Some lop is okay. So as programmers, we do a lot of summing and looping through things and adding things up. So it's good for us to get some practice. We will keep working on looping next week because we're really just getting started with it. So I'll say prompt the user for a number, create a sum of the number and all numbers less than. say maybe all positive numbers. You guys will be coming back saying that was not accurate. So we're going to need some variables again. Let's define our main. Notice that when you type in a comment like this, the hashtag kind of comment, the next time you press enter, it doesn't indent for you. So make sure you press tab to get that indent back, because it can kind of lose it and get you off track.
In the first one, it says all positive numbers less than what?
The number.
Oh, okay.
That's how lazy I am. Okay, so our sum is going to be 0, and we're going to start out with a user number that we'll set to 0. And so our prompt, our input, is going to be just like the last one. We're going to convert it to an integer. We want to input, and our prompt is going to say something nice like, please enter a number, enter 0 to quit. Now, in our while loop, again, we can just say while user num not equals 0, colon. For this one now, we're going to have another loop, right? Because this is for our prompting our input. That's what this loop is for, to ask the user if they want to go again. But we're going to go ahead and create a loop within this loop to add up all the numbers that are this number and less than. So while what can we do? We need like another variable to hold some of this stuff. I think I'm going to create another variable called count. And then when our user number is not equal 0, the first thing I want to do is set count equal to our user number Now this inner while loop then is going to say while our count is greater than 0. We want to add to our total and subtract from our counter. So we'll say count equals count minus 1. That should end our inner loop. So now we're back to our outer while loop, and we're going to prompt our user to see if they want to give us a new number. And that's going to be the end of our outer loop. So when I press enter, I'm going to backspace so that I'm even indentation level with that first while. And then I'm going to print our results. And we'll just have it say the total is our total. Now this is a nested loop, and loops can definitely be confusing. Let's run it and see if it's working first. And then we'll use that debugger so we can step through the code and see what's happening. Oops. Need to execute that main. Try again. Okay, so now I've got my prompt, enter a number. I'm going to do 5. It's very mad at me. Let's see what it says. It says that, do what? I got a what?
You add single quotes around 0.
Where?
In your username, just enter 0.
Oh, okay. Well, that won't make us crash, though.
Yeah, you never declare total.
Do what?
Then declare total.
Oh, I made it sum. Look at that. Okay, let's make sum total. Good debugging. Now let's see. Let's try our number. 5. It looks like we maybe need to put our print statement someplace else, you think? Not getting anything out, just more prompts. So I want to stop running this. So I'm going to click the red stop icon and think, I obviously need to indent, put this print someplace else. I think I better put it inside that while loop, and I think I want it to be before we prompt for a new number. So I'm going to cut it and paste it. So now in our outer loop, we say while the user num's not equal to 0, set our counter equal to the number the user put in. While that counter is greater than 0, add to our total. But we shouldn't be adding our user number to our total, should we? We should probably add the count, because the count is the one that's going to go down. Then we're going to subtract from our count. So we don't need that user number anymore at all. So let's see if we're closer there. Here, I've got my prompt. I'm going to put in 5. Oh, that's better. Now I'm seeing the total for 5 is 15, and I know that's right. So I'll try 4. Now 4 says it's more than 5. Does it keep getting bigger? Why would that be? It's right here. Whenever we start with a new number, we need to make our total equal 0 again. Or else we're just going to keep adding to what we already have. So every time we get a new number from the user, we're going to set that number up as our counter and start our total at 0 again. Now let's see if that's looking a little better. Much better. Is it working? No?
Mine's telling me there's something wrong.
Something wrong?
I got 15 and 10 for 94. Sorry.
1510, yeah. Is it working? Let's put some comments in and let's do the debugger here, and then we'll get everybody's fixed. Now, does anybody have syntax errors where they can't run it at all? Because we need to get those fixed first. So right over there, say no, totally expect right there. Right there. Just wash those red squiggles. That's the hardest one. Now trust me. Oh, put that one there. Good job. So that's the summer. You see any other ones? I writing by that space. That works. Anybody else with their test here? Bottom? Okay, let's run with the debugger. So there's a couple of ways you guys can do it, right? They showed you yesterday or last time that the play button runs your code. The button beside it with the little bug that's getting overlaying the green run arrow is the debugger. And that's the one we want to try. So let's debug it. So what's going on here is the debugger is showing us our input statement. So I'm going to type a number, 5. It's not letting me do much. We need to set some breakpoints here. Okay, let's copy all this code. I'm going to Control A and Control C. I'll figure out, I know that they showed you guys how to use the debugger last time, but I'm not seeing how. I want to make sure I know how before I get everybody messed up with it. So let's search for that Visualize Code website. And it was this Python tutor. Because I want to paste this code in to that Python tutor so that we can watch it step by step. And when you're working with loops, actually, when you're working with anything in programming, you should never be embarrassed if you're having trouble or if you don't understand. It might seem like you're always the one that doesn't understand and this person next to you always gets it, but there's going to be a time when they're not going to get it and you're going to be able to help them too. So don't worry, it'll all even out. But with loops especially, it's really critical that you do as much as you can to understand what's going on. because this is an area that seems to be a real challenge to people. So we want to make sure that we're watching the code run any opportunity we have. So I'm going to choose Visualize Execution. When I get to the visualizer then, my little red arrow is sitting here at the end of my comments, ready to run my code. I'm going to click Forward, and I should see the Python interpreter read through my main function. So you saw how that happened really fast. It just read it, and it got it ready to run. Now, when I get to the line of code that actually runs the main, and I click it, we'll see that things actually start to happen. Now our main function starts running. We see it over here in memory that our main has been allocated, and it's beginning to run. So if I click Forward, I should see the variables get declared and initialized. Then we're going to see our input prompt. Now, it's right down here below that forward button. It's waiting now for me to type in a number. So I'll type in 4 because I don't want anything that's too big, and submit. Now, look at over here in memory. Our user num is now 4. So now we're to the line of code that is our while statement. If we click Forward, we'll see Python is going to evaluate that condition of our while loop. And it came out true because now we're executing the body of our while loop. So first, we're going to set our count variable equal to our user number. There it is. Now they're both the same. We're going to initialize our total again. It was already 0. And we're going to go into our inner loop. So while our counter is greater than 0, we're going to add to our total. We're going to subtract from our counter. We see it now. Our counter is 3. We're going to evaluate the while loop again. Is 3 greater than 0? Yes. So it's going to execute that code again, adding to our total, and then subtracting from our count. Now our count is 2. Is it greater than 0? Yup. So we're going to execute that code again, add to our total, subtract from our count. Our count is now going to be 1, but it's still greater than 0, so we're going to execute our loop body again, add to our total, subtract from our count. Now, this time, count is not greater than 0, so our while loop is going to end. So we should see the arrow move to the line of code that's the print statement after our while loop. There it is. It's ready to print that information out. And now it's prompting us for our next input. You can put in another number if you want and watch it. I'll do a 2, something small. As we go through, we can see it update everything. Start adding to our total and subtracting from our count. That's going to happen real quick because we don't have very many numbers there. We'll print out our total and then prompt for another number. So I'm going to type 0 to end it and click Submit. Watch how that'll go through our loop. And in our while statement, our user number not equal 0 will be false. So we'll jump to the end, which is the end of our module, so we don't have any more code to execute there. Now, if you want to try visualizing some of the other programs that we wrote today, you can. Always remember this website is here to help. I wanted to give you a little bit more lab time than this today. Bad, but sometimes once we get started with looping, I don't really like to break our train of thought too much because as you guys are thinking about it, it's kind of important to be able to keep thinking about it. Get some messages there. So you just have about 20 minutes. The assignments that you can work on your own. The tutor Loops with Turtle is from the Runestone Academy, and it's one of the chapters in the Runestone Academy, and it talks about looping, and Turtle is kind of a graphical utility that you can use with Python, so you can actually visualize your loops running because you'll see the lines moving across the screen and stuff. So that's it in your Runestone Academy. And then you have the Chapter 5 review questions that are due on Tuesday. I don't have the Code Academy chapter for looping because it's long and horrendous and people might kill me if I assigned it. But don't forget, you still get extra credit for doing all of the Code Academy stuff if you get through it. So, questions? Everybody good? Okay.
So all we're turning in is loops with turtles in chapter 5 questions for Tuesday.
We will have this Python sum of squares program due Tuesday also. You can work on that if you want to. So it's going to be a lot like that program that we just did, only instead of just adding the number to the total, you're going to add the square of the number to the total. So 2 times 2 instead of just 2. What's it do? Have you completed your things on the module before? You might have to go back up to that one before the Unit 2 exam. Okay, I'm going to end our Zoom session here.